lot of people. Connections between how the kids got hooked in, we started to see the patterns. One of Bob Villard's favorite subjects was Brock Pierce. He was a common snapshot boy being sold by Bob Villard's eBay seller. Brock in the pictures was young, appeared to be 13, 14. Brock Pierce, meanwhile, was connected to Mark Collins Rector and Chad Shackley. We saw that they owned a company together called Den, which again, on the surface, it seems kind of logical that a child actor would grow up and become, use their money that they had made as a child perhaps and open an internet company. When we started to realize what this really was, it became a much bigger deal.
I was a New York City police detective, went to college and law school, became an investment banker, and then I backed into writing. I've broken very big stories over the years. Been very fortunate to break big stories. In the late 90s, 1990s, I knew about the dot-com bubble. And that it was just extraordinary. A lot of people lost fortunes. One of the ones was Digital Entertainment Network that I just happened to go across my desk, and I read about it a little bit, and I thought it might be a good story.
In the 80s, it was MTV that captured the attention of young people all over the world. However, now that youngsters are turning to the internet, a company called Digital Entertainment Network thinks they've got a chance of becoming the next big thing. They've created television-like programming exclusively for the web.
What makes Den different than other internet companies that have come before it? It's a fusion of the marketing power of Madison Avenue with the technology of Silicon Valley and the entertainment of Hollywood.
They were aiming their programming primarily for young people. So it was a whole new concept.
The majority of young people today are not finding themselves reflected in television. We're creating content that specifically targets your needs, your wants, your desires.
We're creating a new form of entertainment to serve the global youth audience.
Can we get a little sponge for Mark? He's getting a little shiny. It's not up here. I'm sorry, a little shiny under the eye.
Okay. Makeup.
Mark Collins Rector, somehow on one of the early chat lines, which were a little more than hookup places, he came across Chad Shackley.
You really should be on camera.
I'm on camera.
Not what I mean.
Who at the time was maybe a 15-year-old kid, and Collins Rector was much older than that.
Today's global youth audience.
Mark Collins Rector moves to be close to Chad Shackley, and then they start, for lack of a better word, dating. Eventually, Chad moves in with Mark Collins Rector.
Chad and I had jointly developed Concentric Network Corporation, which was one of the very first internet service providers.
And then they brought in Brock Pierce. Now, how Brock Pierce eventually landed there is anybody's guess.
A friend of ours introduced us to Brock Pierce. And Brock, at the time, was producing his first independent feature. He'd been an actor for many years. And together, the three of us completed what was eventually to become Den.
Everybody was just throwing money at these companies. David Geffen, I believe, put in $250,000. Brian Singer, he had $50,000. Michael Huffington put about $5 million into this. It must have been $150 million that was pumped into us. Now, 15 years ago, $150 million was still a pretty good piece of
I
change.
need somebody to ask me a question so I can give you an answer. Is that Jay? Come here, Jay. Drill me on camera.
He was flamboyant. I mean, everybody told me he was very theatrical, very dramatic. He had a very good way of getting his way. Think about this. He takes a 15-year-old kid from his parents to move in with him. That's Chad. Most of us would be afraid to, even if we did, whether it was male or female, you'd be terrified to even ask that question for fear that they're gonna come along and take you away in handcuffs.
Surely you have something out of all this bullshit you can cut 5 seconds out of to get from me, right?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
They had a great idea. Their idea was to make their own films and put it on the internet. Well, lo and behold, that's what Netflix is doing now. Of course, it's 15 years later. The problem was the internet or computers did not have the capability for that. But meanwhile, they were paying people money and filming as though it were a major studio.
I was called to go out for an audition for the show, Royal Standard.
I am 14 years old, and I started acting when I was about 5 years old. I enjoyed a lot, so it's a fun thing.
So we went over to Din, and I had the audition there, and I met him, met Mark Collins, director, and I met some of the other people there. Everybody seemed impressed, and you know, this is the guy for the part, the kid for the part, and yeah, that had never happened before. Just getting, you know, hired on the spot like that. I thought he was nice. Thought he was a nice guy. I thought he was nice, you know. Yeah.
How I feel about working on the Royal Standard set, it's great. Crew's wonderful. It's a lot of fun working on green screen. I get to learn some martial arts more than I already know, so it's lots of fun. It's wonderful.